In the farthest corner of the galaxy lies a place where survival is a myth, and death is a form of entertainment. But one man, a human no less, walked into the arena not to win, but to change everything. What he did next left an entire empire shaken. This is not just a story, it's a rebellion written in dust and blood. Before we dive into this unforgettable tale, do me a huge favor, drop a like, share it, and subscribe. Your support fuels these epic journeys. The Maw wasn't just a name. It was a warning carved into the bones of a dead planet, deep beneath the crust of Valis 9, inside an ancient metallic world that groaned under its own gravity. The arena stretched like a scar, silent, circular, and lined with teeth-shaped spikes. No one came here to win. They came to be devoured. Today, it was a celebration. The Valkyrian Empire had crushed yet another rebellion, and to mark the triumph, they brought out something special, an exotic prisoner, a symbol of humiliation made flesh. A human. Jack Mercer stood barefoot at the center of the arena, the dust swirling around his feet, his hands bound loosely in front of him. He didn't look like a warrior. His clothes were torn, stained with old blood and engine grease. He was tall, yes, but in a lean, wiry way, like someone used to surviving more than conquering. Above him, the crowd screamed, a choir of steel-jawed warlords, razor-toothed officers, and curious youths of the Valkyrian caste. They banged their fists against the viewing platforms, shouting for blood. Era Vex didn't shout. She leaned against the edge of the commander's balcony, her silver eyes dim behind her visor. A high-ranking strategist, Era had seen hundreds of executions in the Maw. Today was supposed to be routine, but something about this man, Sindin the Beast, the announcer snarled through the echo amplifiers. The far gates groaned open. What came out wasn't a creature, it was a nightmare. A hulking monster emerged, dragging armored limbs across the sand. 3 arms ending in blade-tipped claws, armor grown from living metal, and a mouth so wide it looked like it had no face, only teeth. Each breath it took steamed with acid. Its saliva hissed as it dripped onto the floor. Jack blinked up at it, then exhaled softly. Well, that's just rude, he muttered. The crowd laughed at first. Laughed like it always did when prey tried to be funny. The beast screamed and charged. Jack didn't move. Not until the last second, and even then he didn't run. He pivoted. Just one smooth twist, letting the beast carve air where his head had just been. His body flowed with unnatural calm. Then he stumbled back like he'd tripped over his own foot. "Oh no," he said sarcastically. "I'm so scared." The crowd's laughter faltered. Era narrowed her eyes. The beast roared, lunged again. This time, Jack ducked under a claw, rolled through the sand, and came up behind it, slapping the monster's armored rear like it was a teammate in a locker room. "Tag, you're it." Gasps rippled through the arena. The creature spun, furious, swinging wildly. Jack dodged again, not with precision, but with flair. He danced away like a street brawler with too much caffeine, all bounce and swagger. Every move he made seemed ridiculous, until you realized it was keeping him alive. The beast attacked again, and again, and again. But the more it attacked, the sloppier it got. Jack didn't fight back. Not really. He just kept moving, kept talking. "Careful," he said. "You'll pull something." Maybe a pride muscle. The crowd, once hungry for slaughter, now sat in stunned confusion. This wasn't a fight. It was a comedy sketch with death on the guest list. The beast finally landed a blow, or thought it did. Jack let himself fall, rolled, popped back up behind it, and blew a kiss. Then something impossible happened. The monster tripped. It wasn't dramatic. Jack simply redirected its charge with one well-placed sidestep and a subtle nudge with his elbow. Its massive weight worked against it, and it crashed, face first into the arena floor. Silence. Not even the announcer dared speak. Jack stood over the beast, breathing steadily, brushing dust from his pants like he'd just wrapped up a morning jog. Then, as if remembering something important, he reached into the inside of his torn shirt and pulled out a small object, a necklace. Thin, old, dangling from it an image of a child, laughing. He stared at it for a long moment. The crowd didn't see his expression, but Era did. From the distance, from behind her visor, she saw it, a flicker of something real. Grief? Hope? Maybe both. Then Jack tucked the necklace away and looked back up at the crowd. Was that the warm-up? He called out. I was promised a real fight. The silence fractured. Some in the crowd howled in fury, humiliated. Others laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly. They genuinely laughed. Era Vex didn't laugh. She folded her arms tighter and turned to her assistant. Who is he? She asked. The assistant flipped through the data tablet. Jack Mercer. Human. Former mercenary. Court-martialed for insubordination on Zatros. Refused to follow bombing orders. Era's gaze returned to the figure in the sand. Jack was now sprawled on his back, staring up at the artificial sky above the arena like it held answers. She didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a killer. But whatever he was, he hadn't just survived. He had changed the script, and the Maw remembered everything. The second fight wasn't supposed to be survivable. Not for someone like him. Jack Mercer stood in the arena again, his left arm bound in a crude sling of fabric torn from his own shirt, dark with dried blood. A gash across his ribs throbbed with every breath. The medics had offered basic treatment. He'd declined. No one cared if he was patched up. The crowd only cared if he could last long enough to amuse them again. They had fed him to a predator, the first time an unpredictable brute. This time, they gave him something different, smarter, faster, designed to kill. The Challenger was a Valkyrian drone fighter hybrid, its mind half-synthetic, its instincts sharpened by algorithms perfected over centuries. It didn't roar, it didn't taunt, it simply calculated and attacked. The match began with silence. Jack rolled his shoulders, exhaled, and muttered under his breath, "Let's dance." The creature was on him in an instant, a blur of motion. Jack ducked, but not fast enough. A blade skimmed his shoulder, slicing through flesh like paper. Blood bloomed. He stumbled back, lips curling not from pain, but amusement. Wow. Fast. Did they upgrade you? Or am I just getting slow? No one laughed this time. He moved differently now. Less flair, less showmanship. He still dodged, still pivoted, but it wasn't playful. It was survival. Every motion was tighter, more focused. He was conserving, bleeding. In the observation deck above, Era Vex watched without blinking. Something about him had changed. The man who had turned a beast into a circus act was still cracking jokes, but the rhythm was off. His words carried something heavier now, not defiance, resignation. Elsewhere in the arena's upper tiers, someone else was watching too. Small hands clutched the railing. Bright eyes followed. Every movement. Rin, a training cadet, barely into his second growth phase. Rin had snuck away from his class the moment he'd heard Jack was fighting again. He wasn't supposed to be here, but he couldn't stay away. He had watched the recordings of Jack's first match over and over again. The dodges, the footwork, the laugh. It was like watching someone dance between death's fingers. And live, now he watched again, eyes wide with worry. Jack ducked under a spinning kick, rolled into the sand, and barely missed another strike aimed at his throat. He came up coughing, sweat pouring down his back. His vision swam. He blinked hard and grinned through bloody teeth. He wheezed. This would be a lot easier if you were slower, or if I was smarter. The hybrid swung again. Jack didn't dodge this time. He twisted his body just enough to redirect the blow, letting it glance off his shoulder as he spun with the impact, using it to launch himself backward out of range. He landed on one knee, his breath caught. Then, the hybrid moved in for the kill, and Jack did something no one expected. He dropped flat onto his back. The blade passed harmlessly above his chest, and as the hybrid adjusted, Jack kicked upward with both feet, Hitting the machine square in the midsection, it staggered. Not much, but enough. Jack rolled out from under it, came up to one knee, and shoved a handful of arena dust into its eye sensors. A cheap move. An unfair move. A human move. The creature froze, recalibrating. In that fraction of a second, Jack struck it behind the knee with a metal shard he'd pocketed earlier. The hybrid's leg gave out. The arena gasped. Jack stood over it, trembling, breathing like he'd just outrun a planetquake. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just said quietly, "Sorry," and then he walked away. That night, Era ran the security footage herself. She paused the screen on a still image, Jack limping off the field, blood trailing behind him. She tapped a control panel and pulled up his classified file. Earth-born, former contractor, served in the Zatros campaign, refused to complete an aerial bombing order. The report stated he had gone rogue, disobeyed direct command. The strike proceeded anyway, resulting in collateral civilian deaths, including one child, age 6. Her name was Ellie Mercer. Era sat in silence for a long time. Later that week, she requested to meet him. They stood face to face in a cold chamber beneath the arena. Jack leaned against the wall, arms crossed. A bandage circled his torso. He looked smaller in person, or maybe just tired. "Why do you keep fighting?" she asked him. He looked at her, unblinking. "I don't," he said. "I just refuse to die like I'm already dead." She stared at him. "You had a daughter." His jaw tightened. His voice dropped. She laughed like thunder, even when she was scared. He paused. "She's the reason I didn't pull the trigger that day." Era nodded once and left. Back in the training quarters, Rin was sketching again. He wasn't good at drawing yet. His lines were messy, his shading off, but the image was clear. It was Jack, dodging an attack, laughing through blood. Underneath the picture, in clumsy handwriting, Rin had written, "Not afraid, not ever." Jack didn't know about the drawing. He didn't know the boy had already started mimicking his movements during drills, or that others were starting to notice. He didn't need to, because something had shifted. He could feel it, not just in the crowd's eyes or Era's gaze, but in the silence that followed him. When he left the arena, no longer mockery, no longer dismissal. Now, they were watching him for something far more dangerous. They were watching him to learn. The whispers came before the orders did. In the training halls of Valkyrian's military academy, something unusual had begun to take root. It didn't start with a formal lesson or a decree from the high command. It started in the shadows between drills, in stolen glances, in the restless energy of young cadets who had seen something different, something impossible. They had seen Jack Mercer fight, not with brute strength, not with savage power, but with movement, with unpredictability, with a kind of reckless elegance that made survival look like an act of rebellion. At first, it was dismissed. A fluke, they said, a human anomaly. But then one of the junior cadets tried it, then another, and another. Soon, entire sparring sessions looked different. Pairs once locked in rigid combat routines began weaving, flowing, dodging blows instead of trading them. Some instructors were furious. Others watched silently, unsure what to believe. One squad leader from the Outer Ring colonies reported a live combat engagement gone wrong, ambushed by raiders. They were outnumbered and undersupplied. But one of the younger soldiers, a 17-year-old cadet, broke from the formation and started using evasive footwork and distraction maneuvers. It shouldn't have worked. It did. They survived. The entire unit made it out alive. The report didn't name Jack directly, but the techniques were unmistakable. It didn't take long for the unrest to bubble to the surface. One evening, in the dim corridors beneath the arena, Jack made his way to the barracks showers. His ribs were still healing from the last fight, but he walked upright, carrying the kind of calm that didn't look earned, it looked worn in. He never saw the three warriors step out of the shadows behind him. They weren't rookies. They were veterans hard-faced, traditionalists, trained in the old codes. loyal to the old ways. Each bore the mark of years carved into their armor, and in their eyes was the kind of hatred that had nothing to do with Jack personally. He had become a symbol, and symbols made people dangerous. "You mock everything we are," one growled, stepping into his path. Jack stopped, expression unreadable. "Evening," he said casually. "Do I know you? You don't need to," said the second. "But we know you, and we're here to remind you what real warriors look like." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Oh good," he muttered. Another teaching moment. They came at him all at once, not as assassins, not to kill, but to break, to beat him down and make him submit, to teach him fear. Jack didn't fight back. He moved. He ducked, pivoted, used walls and columns to block lines of attack. He never struck, never raised a fist. Every movement was about escape, not domination. Minutes passed. The hall echoed with grunts and frustration. The three warriors, bigger and stronger, began to sweat. Their strikes missed by inches. Their anger clouded their rhythm. Jack didn't taunt them. He didn't laugh. He just moved. When one finally tripped over his own momentum and hit the floor with a crash, Jack exhaled and stepped back. The others froze. "Still feel like teaching?" he asked softly. They didn't answer. He turned and started to walk away, then paused. "It's funny," he said over his shoulder. "You think strength is about how hard you hit, but the real kind? It's knowing when not to hit at all." And with that, he left them there, breathing hard, confused, defeated without a single bruise to show for it. News of the altercation didn't stay secret long. When Rin got caught mimicking Jack's footwork during weapons drill the next day, it wasn't met with curiosity. It was met with punishment. The instructor shouted, called him undisciplined, foolish. He was ordered to scrub the courtyard tiles until nightfall alone. The boy didn't cry. He didn't even flinch. He just got to work, small hands red and raw against the cold stone. Jack found him there after curfew. The boy didn't notice him at first. When he finally looked up, surprise flickered across his face. "I didn't tell anyone," Rin said quickly. "About what you did." "I didn't mean—" Jack raised a hand. "I know," he said. He walked over and sat beside the boy on the cold tile floor. They sat in silence for a while. The sky above was artificial, painted with moving clouds and a programmable moon, but in that moment, it felt strangely real. "I didn't mean to disrespect the drills," Rin said eventually. "I just thought maybe there was another way." "There is," Jack replied, "and they hate it because it doesn't come from them." Rin looked down at his bruised knuckles. "They said I was wrong." Jack gave a small laugh. "You probably are," Rin blinked. "But that doesn't mean you stop," Jack added. "If they're punishing you for trying something different, it means you're doing something they're afraid of." The boy was quiet. Jack stood, stretching stiff joints. Before he left, he rested a hand on Rin's shoulder. "If you ever feel like you're alone," he said, "you're not. You're just walking ahead of them." As Jack disappeared into the shadows, Rin sat still, heart pounding, hands still raw, but now they didn't hurt. Elsewhere, in the war councils, the unrest had reached the ears of generals. Some wanted Jack executed immediately before his defiance became doctrine. Others, more cautious, argued he was exposing a weakness in their training, one they could not afford to ignore. Aravex said nothing. She watched from the sidelines, eyes focused not on Jack, but on the younger soldiers following in his path. It was no longer a question of survival. It was a question of change, and the problem with change is that it never asks permission. It wasn't just a fight. It was a reckoning. For weeks, the Valkyrian hierarchy had argued in hushed tones. Behind closed war room doors, some called for Jack Mercer's execution. Others saw him as a threat, too abstract to silence with violence alone. A handful quietly suspected he had revealed something far more dangerous than rebellion, a flaw in their own doctrine. The debates ended when Warlord Thanek made his announcement. He would fight the human himself. No one challenged Thanek. He was more than a leader. He was a living myth, the architect of 3 planetary conquests, the slayer of the Borean kings, The unbroken fist of the Valkyrian line, his armor, black and crimson, bore the claw marks of extinct beasts. His body was a map of war scars like rivers, eyes like frozen fire. He didn't speak often, but when he did, the entire empire listened. "I will end the disruption," he declared. "With my own hands." The arena was filled beyond capacity. Warborn from across the stars gathered, pressing shoulder to armored shoulder, breathing the dust of history. Above them, high on the viewing platforms, officers watched with tightly clenched jaws. Aravex stood among them, arms folded, visor dimmed. Her pulse was steady. Her thoughts were not. Jack didn't want to be there. He'd tried to refuse, asked, pleaded, argued. This wasn't about pride. He didn't want to fight Thanek not out of fear, but because he knew how this would look. Another spectacle, another blood rite. And no matter the outcome, someone would use it to justify something worse. But in the end, he agreed, because he understood one thing more clearly than anyone else. If he ran, the myth would only grow. If he fought and lost on his terms, maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to break the cycle. The gates opened. Jack walked into the arena like a man heading to work. No armor, no blades, just a wrap over his knuckles, a band of cloth tied across one knee, and a quiet stillness in his eyes. Thanek stood waiting, already inside the ring, a mountain with a heartbeat. He held no weapons. Either he didn't need them. The crowd roared. Thanek nodded once. Jack didn't return it. The announcer spoke in Valkyrian dialect, but the message was clear. The final match had begun. Thanek moved first. His charge was like a collapsing building, fast, heavy, unstoppable. Jack barely had time to roll aside, the ground shattering where he'd just stood. Dust filled the air. Jack came up coughing, sidestepped, and instantly had to duck again as Thanek's elbow swept toward his head like a steel hammer. The force was unreal. Each strike from the warlord cracked the air like thunder. Each step sent tremors through the floor. Jack dodged, twisted, let the warlord's own momentum carry him past. He didn't try to counter. There was no point. Thanek was stronger than anything he'd faced before, stronger than the beast, smarter than the hybrid, and far, far more patient. The fight went on for minutes, then longer. Thanek drove forward, precise and methodical. Jack danced around him, burning energy with every dodge. Every fake. Blood ran from a reopened cut near his temple. His ribs throbbed with every breath. "You're tiring," Thanek said between attacks. Jack grimaced, grinning through it. "I get that a lot." Thanek didn't laugh. Another hit. This one clipped Jack's shoulder, sending him spinning into the sand. The crowd gasped. Era leaned forward unconsciously. Jack lay there, breathing hard. He knew he couldn't keep this up. His legs were slowing. His hands were starting to tremble. One mistake was all it would take. He thought of Ellie, not as a ghost, as a laugh, a high, bright sound that had once filled the air with light. He got up. Thanek came again, slower now, deliberate. He thought the end was near. Jack stepped toward him, not away, not around, toward, and then he dropped to one knee, not in surrender, but into a slide. Thanek raised a fist, too late to stop it. Jack's shoulder slammed into his thigh, off-balancing the warlord just enough, not to hurt him, just to shift him. And with that motion, Jack twisted, hooked a leg behind Thanek's ankle, and let his own body fall, pulling the warlord's balance with him. The two crashed into the dust. Together. Silence. Thanek rose first, slow and steady, shaking off the impact like a minor inconvenience. He looked down at Jack, who lay on his back, arms flung wide, chest heaving. Then, something no one expected. Thanek extended his hand. Jack stared at it for a long second, then took it. The warlord pulled him to his feet. "You fight like a man who has nothing left," Thanek said, voice low, as if every breath is borrowed. Jack chuckled, wiping blood from his mouth. "Maybe it is." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't know how to respond. Something ancient had just been shaken loose. Far above, among the youngest cadets, Rin stood frozen. In his hands, he clutched a piece of worn paper, a drawing of Jack, mid-dodge, laughing. His fingers curled around the edges, crinkling the lines. But he didn't look away. Down in the arena, Thanek turned to the crowd and raised one fist. "This man," he said, "is not like us, but he has faced death and taught it patience." He looked at Jack again. That makes him worth learning from. Jack didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just stood there, bloody and broken and breathing, still breathing, and in that moment, that was victory enough. What if the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy wasn't the strongest, but the one who refused to fight like everyone else? Jack Mercer didn't just survive the Maw. He rewrote the rules of war. And long after the crowds faded and the weapons cooled, his story lived on not in statues, but in the way people fought, the way they lived, the way they chose. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so I can keep bringing you stories that defy imagination and echo across the stars.